sometimes assumptions and statements that might have been made in February, March, April, as you get more clinical experience in June, July, and August, change. And you need to, be humble enough and flexible enough to admit that you're still in a learning process, and always make your recommendations, your conclusions, hopefully flexible conclusions, at the time based on the data and evidence you have. So that's an introduction to an answer to your question, which is, we are starting to see things now that we didn't see early on. One, that people, even those who are not hospitalized, people who have had symptoms, were home in bed for a couple of weeks, essentially cleared the virus and then felt they wanted to get back to a normal life, who find that a substantial proportion of people don't feel normal for several weeks beyond the so-called clearing of the virus. We don't even know how long that's going to last. The other thing that is even more disturbing is that there are case reports and now series coming out. I just went through a whole bunch of them literally a couple of hours ago, of individuals who were sick, thought they got better, and then they have cardiovascular problems, myocarditis, cardiomyopathy can lead to arrhythmias, sometimes even sudden death, neurological abnormalities when you do MRIs and PET scans, both of the heart and of the central nervous system. There are things that we didn't imagine. So this idea that if it doesn't kill you, you're okay, we're going to start modifying that a fair amount and be really careful about how benign a so-called recovered infection might be. I don't know where that's going to go, but there's clearly something there that the lingering effects, both of things as symptomatic as fatigue and brain fog and things like that, as well as some organic things that clearly are demonstrable on MRIs and PET scans and things like that. So we're in the learning process, and we need to withhold any judgment until we learn more about these post-recovery syndromes that people have.
So a lot of people are wondering when it is safe to do X, go to school, fly, etc. So a couple questions about that. What's the triggering point that you think would make resuming public schools, students attending public schools, safe?
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm glad you asked it in that way, because it's the same thing you always get asked. You're asking it, understandably, for the United States, except that the United States isn't one place. It's like 30, 40, 50, as it were, different places. So the way you look at something like school, as I always say, the default position should be, in general, that you try as best as possible to get the schools open, because of what we know about the deleterious effects on children, psychologically and even from a nutritional standpoint, the isolation, the things that are bad for the development of a child. Then there are the downstream, deleterious, unintended ripple effects on family, have to disrupt work schedule. So as a default, you should try to get the kids back. But you cannot ignore that you have to pay attention to the safety, the welfare, and the health of the children, of the teachers, and of the people associated with them. Which means that when you make a decision about opening, you've got to look at where you are and what the level of infection is. There's a big difference between a green zone or a green county where there's very little infection in the community, and you're dealing with an elementary or a middle school. You can't throw caution to the wind, but you can open with a fair degree of safety and impunity. Then you have what's called the yellow zone. We have a degree of infection there that you may need to do some mitigating things. You may need to, and this should be decided at the local level with attention to the guidelines that the CDC has put out about opening schools, because they're very helpful to read through the guidelines. And you could do things like hybrid examples, part online, part in there. Physical mitigations, desks that are separated by M, morning, afternoon classes, every other day classes, doing what you can do outside, good ventilation. It's a whole bunch of things that you can do. And then know how you deal with a student or students who get infected. Then you get the red zone where you've got a lot of infection in the community. You really have to think twice before you want to put kids back in school then, because as we're starting to see, 3 things or more can happen. You go in, the kids get infected, they close down. So why open it up to begin with? Parents say, no, I'm not going to do it. Teachers say, I'm not going to show. I'll do it online, but I'm not going to show. So it's so much more complicated than saying either close them all or open them all. We live in a big country that's very heterogeneous in so many ways, including the level of infection, because there are some places that no problem, and there are some places there is a problem.
That puts a lot of responsibility and emphasis on expertise and process at the local level. I want to back up for a second and come back to that question. So I think there's a consensus that not all the steps to prevent pandemics and enhance public health procedures were practiced some years ago. There was sort of a trend away from taking the threat of pandemics seriously at the national level. What do you think? We are going to have a change in administration, whether it is the same one or a different one. We have an election coming up. It's a chance for new initiatives. What do you think is important to do at the national level to prevent future pandemics, fund public health appropriately, give assistance to local authorities? What do we need to do?
I'm sorry. Is there anything we can do about that?
Sounds like a fire drill.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. This is real time, real life on Zoom.
A fire emergency reported in the building. While this is being verified, please leave the building by the nearest exit or exit.
Boy, oh boy.
That sounds like it's for real.
Yeah. I have to get up.
Okay. Well, we only have a few minutes left anyway. I just want to thank you, and if you have time for another brief one, I was seeing my doctor for my physical a couple weeks ago, and he said, ask Dr. Fauci how he takes care of himself, how he keeps going during this period of time.
Gloria, I'm a bad example of that, because I'm focusing on the job and I'm not paying that much attention to the things I probably should, except my job. So thank you. It's really great being with you. I'm sorry for this. I really apologize.
Not at all. Again, we're in the zone of real life on Zoom. So thank you so much, Dr. Fauci, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being with.
Thank you.
May I have your
Take care.
attention, please? There has been a fire emergency reported in the building. While this is being
Well, again, our thanks to Dr. Anthony Fauci. We'd also like to thank our audience for watching and participating live. If you'd like to watch more programs or support the Commonwealth Club's efforts,